Well, let's get some analysis and reaction to last night's programme. The Conservative peer and pollster, Lord Robert Hayward, is here with me. A very good morning to you. Going into the show last night, Rishi Sunak needed a big performance, didn't he? The polls were not in his favour. So did he manage to pull off a big moment?
Big is possibly a slight exaggeration, but there's no question in my mind, and the vote of the audience, it was the first time that he had clearly led in a debate. And Kay got the audience to vote, and there was no question. She described it as a clear majority for Rishi.
Well, that's interesting. And Liz Truss similarly went in needing at least a safe performance. She didn't want to shift the dial at all. So did she manage that?
Oh, there's no question. She did. She's improved from the first debate where she appeared incredibly wooden and got the lowest ratings. She's improved enormously, comes across well. But the issue that dominated last night was inevitably the Bank of England report, the increase in interest rates, and that played to Rishi's strengths. And I think that's probably what impacted on the audience.
That's interesting that you say that, because some people might say, well, we associate Rishi Sunak with being in charge of the economy for the last 2 years. You might argue that it would count against him.
Yes, I thought that he would have some difficulty in that field, but there was a sense which was conveyed in the audience and their reaction, both on that issue and on others, that he had a grasp, almost as steady as she goes, rather than let's not take a risk at this point. And it was markedly different from previous debates.
And were there any particular moments, for good or for bad, that will stick with the people who are voting for these two leaders?
I think Liz has the problem. It came up in a question from the audience and then was repeated as part of the series of questions to Liz about things she changed her mind on. And that is this pay for people in the North and the Midlands in terms of being a nurse or a policeman. And I think that's going to keep coming back because she wasn't willing to say it was a mistake. What she said was it was interpreted incorrectly. In other words, it's other people's fault. And that didn't resonate well with the audience.
Well, yes, she was challenged quite hard on that, wasn't she, by Kay Burley. Do you feel that she didn't give an adequate response then? Because she just did say, we're not going ahead with this, so why do you keep asking me about it?
I'm judging the reaction of the audience rather than my own perception. And I just listening and watching the audience reaction, one just felt that she didn't deal with it in the same way that one might have done.
And in the same way, why do you think that Rishi Sunak did particularly well last night? Was it solely because there was such a focus on the economy because of the day's news?
I wouldn't say it's particularly well, but he did better than Liz. And I think there's a sense that this was the first time he'd actually got the better of him. And it was what one might describe as the wild forecasts of 13% inflation and a recession and all these sorts of things that he could, as you asked just now, have been in difficulty. But there was a sense that he conveyed the message better so that the message was got across by Rishi in a way that it hasn't been previously.
And yet there's a sense of optimism coming from Liz Truss, isn't there? She was keen to point out, when asked about the Bank of England's predictions, she said recession isn't inevitable. There is the possibility to turn things around. I mean, is that something that people want to hear? They want to feel that there could be a better way?
I think until yesterday with the Bank of England, and its pretty dire forecasts, there was probably a sense that the population at large was willing to go down the path of, well, there is an alternative. But I think the messaging yesterday, and it's been coming from the European Central Bank, from the Fed in the United States, is the world, the free world, is in a difficult set of circumstances. And somebody who, with confidence, can answer the questions, as Rishi appeared to, and as one of the audience said on that clip, briefly, succinctly summarise where we are, I think that was persuasive.
And last time you came on this show, you talked about the impact that programmes like this can have, that debates and interviews, big interviews with the candidates can make on the end result. Do you feel that things have changed? What kind of impact do you think they've made?
Liz has had the best of the last few days, no question about it, with the series of endorsements from different major personalities. I think what happened last night was there was a stop in terms of the momentum in one direction. It won't have necessarily reversed it, but there will be this morning a different sense of messaging that is around. The first question to Rishi was, "It's inevitable, you're going to lose, why don't you withdraw?" And I think probably by the end of that session, one understood why he's not withdrawing, because he had actually got some of his messaging across. But Liz has done well in the previous few days.
And it's interesting timing, isn't it? Because I think the ballots are arriving. Some of the people in the audience had them, some hadn't, most hadn't. But it's crucial timing at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. And to that extent, that has worked in Rishi's favour, because the momentum was with Liz, no question about it. And had the ballots arrived a few days earlier, people would have completed them. I haven't received mine. People I've been speaking to yesterday evening hadn't received theirs. So it is absolutely crucial.
And we keep talking about this poll lead that Liz Truss has. Rishi Sunak's supporters would say that's not what we're witnessing. When we go out and about, we're witnessing much more support than's reflected in the polls. I mean, what's your sense of what's going on?
My sense is that the polls are right up to a point, but you had the audience response last night, and remembering that they were an audience from all over the country. So there have been a lot of undecideds, and I think you may have got a fair amount of them, or them reflected in the audience last night. All the polls, although the number of undecideds has been diminishing, I think the audience last night conveyed a message from the undecideds largely.
Lord Robert Hayward, always very interesting to get your take on things. Thanks so much for coming in this morning. We appreciate it.